one, what is important for you to know before you can make an assessment?
It's important for me to review any documents related to the defendant's life, as well as other members of his or her family or network. It's important for me to look at the different areas of development. Social workers are trained, although there's a clinical expertise in social work, there's another part that we're trained in that medical professions, say doctors, psychologists, and psychiatrists, do not get trained in, and that's looking at all of the other areas of their lives that impact their development. So we're trained to look at, say for instance, school systems, the neighborhood, if they were involved in any institutions like church or Boy Scouts, whatever, looking at all the different areas of their life that impacted their development. So not the person as an individual, but the other areas that impacted their development as well.
Your Honor, I'd ask that you be qualified as an expert.
All right, any objection from the state?
No objection, no.
All right, then court will recognize the witness as an expert in the field of social work.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, you've testified in other cases, correct?
Yes, I have.
All right, and which states have you testified?
The state of Maryland, the District of Columbia, Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania as well, and Delaware.
Now, you prepared a report concerning Mr. Sowell, is that correct?
I did.
Showing you what's been marked for identification purposes as Defendant's Exhibit A-99. Do you recognize that document?
Yes, I do.
What is that?
It is the report that I submitted to you.
All right. And what is the date on that report on the front?
Oh, sorry, July 11, 2011.
All right. And if you could, Ms. James Towns, if you could just summarize for the jury and the court what you did in this particular case.
Sure. I reviewed the thousands and thousands of pages of documents that the defense had pulled together in terms of Mr. Sowell's life and other members of his family. I interviewed Mr. Sowell on 2 occasions. I also interviewed Ramona and Leona Davis. I interviewed his nephew, Jesse Darnell Hatcher. I interviewed one of his teachers as well. And I reviewed some discovery in terms of the background of the case. I reviewed his records from the detention center here, his death certificates, birth certificates of family members, and census reports that dated all the way back to the 1900s that tracked his family history, medical records of himself and his family members, and just his school records and volumes of documents.
I believe on page 2 of your report, it lists various records and people that you talked to. Is that correct?
Yes, it does.
Right. Does that accurately reflect in summary fashion what you did in making your assessment?
Yes, it does.
And after conducting those interviews and reviewing those various records, you've reached some conclusions. Is that fair to say?
Yes, and before that, I forgot that I also interviewed his sister Tressa and had a brief interview with his mother, Claudine Garrison. And it does.
And you have reached some conclusions concerning Mr. Sowell after doing all the work that you have summarized. Is that correct?
Yes, I have.
And those conclusions are reflected in your report, I believe?
Yes, it is.
Beginning on page 18.
Yes.
Can you take a look at your report?
Yes.
If you could summarize your conclusions for the jury, starting with the paragraph at the bottom of 18 concerning the impact of childhood trauma.
Yes. My conclusion was that in Mr. Sowell's case, it's important to put his life history in the context of the trauma that he experienced within his family, as well as the trauma that other members in his family experienced that he witnessed. That clinically we have to pay close attention to the family dysfunction in his family that operated on a continuum throughout his life, that the physical abuse, the emotional abuse, the sexual and verbal and psychological abuse in his family, neglect, abandonment, domestic violence, all impacted his development.
Now, what do you mean that all these things
Well, when children grow up in that sort of environment, when they're exposed to that level of dysfunction, because the different levels of dysfunction were on so many levels, that it has a catastrophic, what we call cumulative effect, meaning that individually some of those things may have been overcome, but because there were so many areas of dysfunction and so many areas and different types of abuse, that it had a horrific cumulative effect on his development.
If you could go to page 20.
Sure.
When you talk about trauma, what do you mean by trauma?
Basically, trauma are events that happened in someone's life that they are either witness or they are directly exposed to that impact them, meaning that they have intrusive thoughts about it, they have nightmares about it. It's something that becomes a part of their either memory or things that they recall that impacted their development, that impacted the way they go about doing their daily lives, that it makes them adjust the way that they